The views expressed on the following program are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily represent those of the Key Biscayne Independent. Portions of the following program were pre-recorded.
And again, I think of her, I think of you, and I want to abuse. She will always be my friend. Why you learn to be this way? No, you don't know.
Live from Key Biscayne, Florida, this is Antisocial, the weekly public affairs program where we look at topics in the news from the sunny island paradise of Key Biscayne, Florida, sometimes national, sometimes local, but we always try to have fun. I'm Tony Winton.
I'm Mike Davey.
Subbing for
Tom Moslum, who is somewhere lost at sea.
Lost at sea, or I don't know, probably lost in thinking about spring training and, what's going to happen next.
Let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets. It's a good thing he's not here today, Mr. Mayor.
Exactly.
Thank you. We have a really interesting show today. It's going to get into two completely different topics, but they're both fascinating guests. And one of them involves an upcoming event here in politics in Florida. And, of course, Mr. Mike Davey, you were a two-term mayor of Key Biscayne, served in the village council, ran for the state assembly at one point, right? State house here in Florida. So it's a field you know probably more about it as a direct participant than I do.
I know a little bit about it. I've been on the winning end and the losing end, so I get what it's all about. But it's interesting. And now that our party has got an election coming up, Ms. Freed, it's March 27th. Is that correct?
25th.
25th.
Right. And introduce our guest, Nikki Freed, right? The former commissioner of agriculture in Florida and a candidate for governor. And now you are running to be chair of the state Democratic Party.
Yes, that is all
Tell us why you would, first off, tell us why you would want that job.
It's not a job that I actually sought after. Even after November, December, January, was getting a lot of calls of people asking me to run for this position, and felt that was not where the next chapter of my life was going to be leading us to. But watching the last few weeks of what is happening in Tallahassee, watching, one party have such control over our state, and so many of these policies that are having such drastic impacts on the people of our state, and people calling me. What are we going to do about, this permitless carry? What are we going to be doing about our higher ed system? And I knew that there was no way that we were going to be able to stop these things today until we get more Democrats actually elected into office. And knowing from my experience of being our only statewide elected Democrat, the fact that I know politics, understand it, I have a master's in campaigning, rolled up my sleeves and said, all right, I'm in. Let's go change our state. Let's go change our party.
So I guess my first question is, what is your plan for March 25th? As you said, we've gotten shellacked. The last election, we got whacked all across the board. Democrats. I am a registered Democrat. I was a Republican. I'm recovering now. And so I guess my question is, what's your plan? What's your plan of action? We've got how many months until the 24 elections? What would you do if you're elected on March 25th? What's your plan? How are we going to get going?
There's a lot, and it's not going to be just one thing. Not one thing is going to be the magic bullet here. It is going to be a combination of how we organize, how we communicate, how we fundraise. It's been one of my biggest pet peeves during being commissioner and elected is a lack of coordination between our organizing groups on the ground, to our elected officials, to the actual party apparatus. There's a lot of things internally that are not going well. And I think a lot of it is our image. And what I've said to a lot of people in our state in the last few weeks when I've been having a lot of these conversations is that I can give $1 million to, let's say, Miami-Dade and say, go register new voters. But if the voters don't like our brand, I don't care how much money you throw at them, they're not going to register as Democrats. So we got to do some real true soul searching. And when me at the helm of the kind of the party, being able to help advise. I think that I'm somebody who comes in from a different kind of perspective and outside the box kind of ideology, looking at different ways at how to handle certain issues, and figuring out that we have to do a better job on listening to the people on the ground. Too many times you see Democratic candidates and electeds who push their own political agenda. These are the things that they want to talk about. These are the things that are important to them, instead of listening to the people of our state. And we've had no outward communication until right before elections. That has to stop. We need to make sure that we're doing year-round, what I call wellness checks, that we're talking to Democrats throughout the state on a consistent basis, that we're doing town halls into our communities. We're investing in our communities. We're obviously doing voter registration. We're asking for people to trust us again. And so that's, again, a lot of branding. That's a lot of leadership. That's also recruitment of candidates, making sure we're recruiting the right type of candidates. I have a whole platform idea, but it's also things that I've been thinking about for 4 years. As sitting as an elected, what are some things that I would have liked to have seen the party do more to support my efforts as an elected? The party right now doesn't support as much as we should be.
Why is that, though? I mean, I guess my question is, what's your autopsy? I mean, you went through a painful situation, and then the drubbing that the party took statewide, the national reaction, donors not wanting to fund races in Florida, and this is a state that voted for Barack Obama. What is the autopsy, and what is your prescription?
It was a complete failure. It's not been something that happened overnight. It's 30 years in the making, and it's a lot of what I say, that in Florida, that the Democrats would rather be the king of the kingdom of one than the prince of a kingdom of a million. And that people are not willing to take a step back to support other people, that they push their own opportunities and their own desires to be the head of whatever it is, whether it's running for governor or running for a mayor or other races. And so we've got to take an approach that we all have to be working together. The internal fighting of the Democratic Party is nauseating. And the type of bombs that get thrown at one another says to the rest of the people of our state, well, why would I want to support them? They can't even get along. And I think that is really, and Republicans have right now a much worse situation. But we've got to be starting to focus on how to bring people together, to realize that there are lanes. There is going to be, a section of our communities and our state and our party that are more progressive in nature. And that's okay. And that's a good thing. They represent a faction of people that feel like they don't have a seat at the table. But that lane is also not more important than a lane of, a more moderate perspective. But the moderates also have to respect that there's value added from our progressive lane. And until we start creating this big tent environment and start recognizing that we're not bad Democrats if we might not see eye to eye on the same policy, that's okay. That's what makes us a big tent. And that's what politics is supposed to be, is to come together and work through those issues, not attack one of those. The problem that we're having, that a lot of electeds don't lean in enough into the local party. And so a lot of times the party is made up of volunteers that are well-intended, good-hearted, but may not have the experience or the knowledge of how to organize an event, or what it takes strategy-wise to make sure that we're going into the right communities and that we're putting in the resources. And so the electeds, I'm going to be asking them to lean back into those local Democratic clubs and caucuses and local organizing, use their leadership skills that they have acquired in being in elected office, lean in and help the locals. But I can tell you that in the 4 years that I was commissioner, as anybody who follows me, I tweet on a pretty consistent basis. I got retweeted 5 times. 5 times in those 4 years from the Florida Democratic Party. And it wasn't because there was animosity, and it wasn't because I wasn't saying the right things. It's because that's not how they were thinking. They were thinking that they had a job on the ground to do, and that's to get more people registered, to turn out more votes. And they don't realize that when they lift up the elected that are doing good job, that helps in all of that overall mission. Why in the world that after the Democrats in D.C. Passed the infrastructure bill, was there not press conferences in every congressional district talking about what that bill is going to do for the people of those communities? These are types of things that I am thinking outside the box to try to make sure that we're putting together the people that are doing the work on the ground, which is our clubs, our caucuses, the people that are registering voters, and the people that they're actually electing have got to come together and start working as a party. It is going to take a lot of work. We are not going to hit a home run in 24. It's going to be a rebuilding, and that's my commitment, is to help in this rebuilding, help on the infrastructure changes, start looking at things from a different prism, and utilizing the resources and skills and the connections that I have made, not just in the last 4 years, but being a lifelong Floridian, and the connections that I've made throughout my entire career.
I think that's great. I think you really touched on a point that I believe is critically important. Is we see politicians when they're running for office, and we don't tend to see them at events when they're not, frankly, unless there are electeds and they're coming back and they're trying to fundraise. And I think what we need to do, what I'd like to see Democrats do, is come out and hold little town halls on Key Biscayne and in Miami that really draw people in, because people are tired. They're tired of sort of being force-fed stuff for 4 months of the year and then being ignored for the other 20 months of the 2-year cycle. And so I think that's great. I think we need to do it. It's got to be done now. It's got to start in April of 2023 if you want people to come out in 24.
Correct. And none of that stuff costs money. Having
Right.
town halls, having press conferences are free. And then you have earned media that shows, and I've even, part of my platform is also having monthly town halls where you're bringing in all of the electeds from those areas, whether it's Key Biscayne and all the electeds, and invite the Republicans, because and invite NPAs, because if we're actually going to create a state that we all want to live in, we all have to get along. And this all one way or the highway attitude doesn't work. And in fact, I've had lots of these conversations with a lot of leading Republicans in our state after my primary, and said, what's next? And I said, look, democracy only works when you have two strong parties and you're able to bring people to the table to make decisions and for the betterment of the collective.
Last question.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm going to say we're running out of time. Your rival has picked up a lot of endorsements, as I'm sure you know. What is your strategy, if you can share a little bit of that with us, about closing the gap in the short time that you have left?
Well, there is no gap. I have got about 300 more votes than her already. But so basically the way it works inside the party is that we have what's called a weighted vote system, that there are certain, every single committee men and women across the state of Florida have a certain amount of votes. Some are more weighted than others. Like in more blue areas, they've got more votes. Then you have 25 votes that are for the House and for the Senate. Congressional delegation has a certain amount of votes. And so a lot of the endorsements that others have announced don't have any votes. The people that we have been targeting are the ones who are actually the voters of the party. And a lot of the electeds, have said to me, look, I didn't know you were getting into this race. Obviously I've already previously endorsed. And I said, that's fine. That's okay, because if we're going to come together afterwards, we need to continue having these types of dialogues. So we're very confident that on the 25th that we're going to win this on the first ballot by the type of support and the diverse coalition that we are in fact pulling together.
Right. No.
Nikki Fried, thank you for joining us in your quest to be the chair of the Democratic Party of the state of Florida. And we hope you will join us if you're successful, or even if you're not. We hope that you'll join us again on Antisocial. Thank you.
Without a doubt. Thank you so much for having me on today. Have a great day.
We'll be back right after this.
Key Biscayne, island paradise. Key Biscayne, island paradise. And we go down the trail to the north point of the Bear Bridge.
And we are back live here at Antisocial. Hey, it's my first time as the full-time co-host, so I'm trying to. I'm
The
trying
hang
to
of it. You'll get the patter. It's all right.
I had my wife sending my golf cart registration to me. These are first world problems here on Key Biscayne.
We're going to make sure you turn off the phone during the show,
That's not
Mr.
possible.
Mayor. But we're back on Antisocial. I'm Tony Winton, and we are just had an interesting segment there with what's could be a game changer, or not, right? If you look at the numbers that Florida had in the last election, one way to look at it is there's no place to go but up.
Well, I think that's right. I keep saying I think, but it's obvious this is what I think. Florida needs two parties. The country needs two parties. And so the Democratic Party here in Florida, the health of the party here in Florida is only going to help the health of the state overall.
Well, it's something we'll be watching. We know that the last election here, there was a lot of, I guess, in this particular area is a good example of kind of the cord. We didn't get into it with Ms. Freed, but the late decision about who was going to be running as a Democrat in the congressional district, and then even a long lead time in the state house races where you have a popular state house representative deciding not to run for re-election, and then plenty of lead time, and then not being able to capture or hold a seat. With the Republicans are able to flip a seat here, and then in the state Senate district,
same thing.
Very
lost it.
Yes,
Right.
that's a longer story involving a thing and redistricting and everything else. But even still, a theoretically winnable seat, or had been a Democratic seat in the past. Again, staying in the win for Republicans. A credit to the Republican organization, certainly, but raising questions here locally for people who are Democrats.
There's plenty of room to grow for the Democratic Party in the state of Florida.
All right. Well, moving from politics now to our next segment, another interesting and fascinating thing that's been in the news a lot. And if you haven't heard about it, I would encourage you to search about this new technology. I guess it's not super new, but the one that's exploded into the public stream anyway as a technology called Chat GPT.
It is interesting, and I frankly wish I'd had it when I was in high school. My grades probably would have been better, probably in college as well.
Well,
my daughter is not allowed to use this. I just want to put that out there. If Mia, you are not allowed to use this.
Well, that is exactly the topic we're going to be talking about with our next guest. Her name is Sophia Barnett. She's joining us from Providence, Rhode Island. She is a freelance journalist whose work has appeared in Wired and Teen Vogue and many other places, and recently wrote a story for Wired, in fact, about how universities, educators in general, are now confronting this incredibly, I think it's an amazing technology. You can have a conversation. It pulls data from everywhere. You can ask it to write poems or write code, I guess people have told me it can do. It's really kind of this, if you think where we are with artificial intelligence, just as today, imagine what the potential holds. Sophia Barnett, welcome to Antisocial.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
What in doing the reporting for your story, were you you got different types of opinions from different institutions? Do you think the educational community is just now coming to terms to this? Have they been hit kind of like off guard? Yeah, by surprise, off guard.
I mean, I would not necessarily say that this is an entirely new phenomenon. I think that the circumstances with Chat GPT are very specific because there hasn't really been artificial intelligence that can do this much for students or for people who are just generally looking to produce any sort of content online. But this is not to say that this is like the first time that the education world has ever experienced conflict with internet tools and potential sources for plagiarism. Back when Wikipedia popped up, everybody started to freak out a little bit because then you have these online articles, these information from anywhere available on the internet without necessarily being able to be attributed to somebody because it's just on Wikipedia. So I think that the question of universities and schools looking at Chat GPT through an angle of plagiarism is not necessarily a new phenomenon, but I will definitely say that artificial intelligence being able to do this much for people who are enrolled in schools is definitely new.
Yeah, I was wondering, in reading your article, to me it brought up the idea of when people used to buy papers. They'd purchase the paper. So when you're going to school, you're earning your degree. You're at Brown, you're earning your degree from Brown, and you're not really earning that degree if you're going out and buying a degree, buying a paper or buying some study. And I think that would be how I would equate it, is if you're using AI to write your paper, it's one thing to maybe clean it up. And so somebody brought up spell check. Right? Are you not allowed to use spell check anymore? Are you not allowed to use any sort of artificial intelligence to check your papers? But there's a distinction to be made. right? There's my work that's being corrected maybe by this AI, or the AI's work that I'm just putting my name on and handing in. And I think that's probably where we're going to get to eventually.
What's the kind of concern, when you've talked to educators, how are they approaching this, formulating policy?
Yeah, so I've spoken to educators in higher education, and I also spoke to people who are in administrative levels at high schools and middle schools, although they were not directly mentioned in the article since the focus was specifically higher education. But I will say that my article was released, I think, probably 2 weeks ago, so things might have changed since then. But the last time that I talked to people, I was told that there are new software developments coming out where people can check for watermarks or run things through new complicated online processes that can determine if it was pre-written. And Chat GPT itself, I've heard that there's going to be a watermark sort of thing that's placed inside somewhere, not necessarily saying Chat GPT, but flagging that it's not generated authentically from a student, whether that be random capitalization in paragraphs or sentences, or it be unnecessary spacing, things like that, just sort of small, tiny things that professors will be able to flag. I am taking classes right now. Obviously, I'm at university, and I've had several professors put in don't use ChatGPT very deliberately and very, very clearly in their syllabi, so that students are aware that this is now being implemented into plagiarism policies, which I also do think is really interesting at the higher education and just generally within the American education system as all levels.
And on the flip side, are there examples where it's seen as an educational tool? Because it can answer a lot of questions.
Yeah, no, totally. I've talked with students and educators who believe that it is a helpful research search engine. And again, someone compared it to Grammarly, which is an online tool that can tell you when your sentences are too wordy or tell you that you should use more transitions and just generally improve the quality of whatever you've pasted into the text box. And I think that there are obviously benefits in that it's, if you use it correctly, sort of like a calculator. It can speed things up for you. It makes sure that you're getting the information that you need, and you can input in very specific prompts so that you can make sure that everything is taken care of. And that is a new development that is certainly going to be helpful for students and educators everywhere.
And I suppose that's the point in terms of what are we going to school for? You're going to school really to learn how to, at least law school, let's say. You go to school not so much to learn the material, but to learn how to be an attorney, how to think like an attorney. And things like this may assist with that in that regard. But you don't want somebody in high school to be able to turn in their paper, their term papers that they did the night before.
Yeah. I can tell you that it is already in use in journalism here in Miami. Sure. The Miami Herald is using AI to write stories on real estate, and they are using it to write stories for restaurant inspections. It's a combination of something called a data scraping tool that goes onto public websites, collects the data. The data is input into the AI, and then the AI generates a story that says this house sold for something, or these restaurants were fined for health code violations, et cetera, et cetera. The same thing can be done with sports agate, the line scores and
sure.
details. Information can be gleaned. Of course, the problem when there's no human being there, it can and has made stupendous errors before, that sometimes have not been caught before publication.
I thought that's what editors are for.
Well, that's the question. Editor, teacher, someone, and I've also read that you're in the legal profession, Mike, that this can be used for legal writing. It's people are seeing not necessarily ChatGPT, but similar bots that could do similar types of work.
Well, and in the legal profession, look, if I've got a motion that I want to draft, I go to the court filings and I find some case that's similar to mine. I look through their motions and I find a motion, and I will use that. I certainly check on their case law, and I will use that to format my own brief, because you build off everybody else. We all are building on those who came before us. So it's interesting. It is an interesting tool. It can be both good and it can be bad. I think we want our children anyway, as they're in their formative years, we want them to learn and how to think and process things for themselves. But once you get to a certain level, I could see where this would be a very useful tool.
Sophia, what are you hearing from students?
I am hearing generally positive things from students, and I would say that is probably because people at these institutions, specifically Brown, I can speak for Brown, but at other Ivy Leagues, I have friends who have mentioned that it's just helpful in minimizing workload for a lot of people. And that's not to say that these students are plagiarizing, which I do think is important to note, because obviously you can use this tool outside of plagiarism. And I think I spoke with a student who was on Bryn Mawr's student committee for academic integrity, and she told me that there's concerns across the board, the student board for academic integrity, because they are afraid that it's going to lower the overall quality of a degree from Bryn Mawr. And I've also heard similar things from educators, high school educators and college educators, both, who are expressing concern at how students who choose to defer to Chat GPT to produce papers or research assignments, whatever the case may be, they will eventually end up going to these institutions of higher education less prepared than other people have been in previous years. Like my generation's probably going to be the last line of that. And they're concerned that now students are going to be underperforming in colleges, and they're going to be just generally less educated and not as strong of critical thinkers because they have this tool, and they might overuse it because, again, we are students, and a lot of the time people just need to get something done, and people will cheat in a lot of circumstances to produce if they are someone who's a high achiever or minimize time. Like, it's something that happens, and I've seen it up close. It's the truth.
That's a question I had, thinking about not just the immediate aspect of, is this paper legit? Is it plagiarized? Is it the work your own? The longer term kind of thing about, I guess, if part of the reason is we do the show here out of a school, and it's a lot of focus on early learning. And a few years ago, the teachers here removed electronic devices, iPads and other things, from the preschoolers, because the studies were showing that the tactile experience of having a book and reading led to better retention, comprehension, and development than having the stimulation, I guess, of an iPad or another kind of a device. And my question is does something happen subtly in the brain where reliance on a technology like a Chat GPT, which essentially is, in some respects, like, I guess, autopilot, for lack of a better term, right? I'm wondering, does it foster a kind of lack of mental sharpness in some way?
That's right. In critical thinking, I think that was Sophia's point about critical thinking. It's not, I don't think people do it maliciously for the most part. Certainly there's people who are trying to game the system at all, but most people, it's expediency, right? You've got 6 papers due toward the end of the semester. You're like, oh God, I can do this one, but I can write this one on, I can do this one through Chat GPT and this one. So you're not really thinking, again, maliciously. It's just you're exhausted and you want to get things done. You know the material, but you'll review the Chat GPT document that is produced. I get that's the danger of it, though, right? We're trying to teach critical thinking. That's the key. We go to school to learn how to be critical thinkers, I hope. And so that is the challenge going forward.
We will see. I did reach out to the Miami-Dade County Public Schools to see if they had a policy on it. And as of yet, they do not. It is still being studied. So add that it's one of the largest school districts in the United States, Miami.
If you want to get a policy here in the state of Florida, all you have to do is put AP ahead of it. We'll get a policy in about a minute.
That's a whole different show, actually.
Oh, sorry.
But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, the positives and the negatives. And Sophia Barnett, again, a freelance journalist whose works appeared in Wired and Teen Vogue, and a student at Brown. Oh, you
just had one more question, Sophia. How do we know that you wrote your article and you didn't use Chat GPT to do it?
The world will never know.
Fair enough.
Vouching it is my work. I did include a little interview excerpt at the very bottom from Chat GPT that I hope you enjoy.
I did. Very much appreciated it.
Thank you, Sophia Barnett.
Thank you, Sophia.
For joining us from Rhode Island, again, for being our guest on Antisocial. And we'll be back right after this.
I am in paradise. Keep escape. I am in paradise.
And we are back live on Antisocial, the radio show, and now on YouTube, actually. That is, we're hoping to get a wider distribution on the video end as well and be able to bring you some visual content once in a while. I'm Tony Winton.
I am Mike Davey.
Well, Mr. Mayor, again, thank you for filling in for our co-host Tom Mazloom, who he told me he was in Broward County today. Like, that's an excuse.
I just think he couldn't get somebody to bail him out, but that's just my theory.
Okay, well, I'm sure I'll hear from him later. But this is the segment where we talk a little bit about what's going on in the island paradise, and often the issues that we talk here, they may seem local, but they actually could be statewide or national issues. And the one I'm thinking of is one we just talked about at a council meeting last night, story in the Independent, involving
e-bikes
and e-scooters. And you haven't been out of office that long. It was an issue for your council.
It was, and it remains. Unfortunately, it remains an issue. It is, again, an issue of state preemption. They have laws on the books up there in Tallahassee that preclude us from making decisions at the local level as to the life safety of our residents, that are not just essentially banning the devices. And so there was a vote last night to support the Chief Sousa, by prohibiting the e-bikes and e-scooters from the village green and giving the authority to the police to start fining people if they find them to be riding them improperly or operating them on the village green, which I think is a good step. But my concern is that we're just waiting for a tragedy to befall us here on the queue.
Here's some insight. The political, it's a difficult issue politically, right? Because you've got, they're very popular. It came out of nowhere. And you have a constituency that has said, and it's I've been to the meetings. I've heard the parents say this. My child is responsible. My child uses to go to school. They are wearing a helmet. It's a way to not use a car and reduce traffic congestion on the streets. How do you approach that? And how do you make a tough decision?
Well, look, if I was sitting up there right now, I think Brett Moss said it well last night when he called them toys. We're talking about toys for kids, and we're putting life safety on hold for toys. I would have been more in favor, frankly, of a moratorium until we have the capability at our level to regulate them. These are 12 and 13-year-olds. They're not, again, it's not malicious on the part of the children. I get the parents want to be good to their kids, but these things go 30 miles an hour and they're on a sidewalk and they don't understand. I've seen kids get hit riding bicycles across across intersections. These things go so much faster and their reaction time is so much less that it's a dangerous situation. And I don't believe, unfortunately, I don't think it's if we're going to have a tragedy. We just had a kid get hit on an electric scooter last Friday. And as I understand it, it was completely the kid was, you say fault, but he was just riding. He wasn't thinking about it. He wound up in the windshield. And fortunately, his parents had him wearing a helmet, because if he hadn't had a helmet, we might have had a tragedy. We might have had somebody dead. And we're very fortunate thus far that hasn't happened. But you can't, life safety's got to be of paramount importance in government.
All right. So, but there are things, and so this is a tough decision, right? The police department can right now start enforcing state law.
Correct.
Motorized scooters are not allowed on sidewalks.
That's true.
And they're not, and they could be writing citations. And also the e-bikes, when they're motorized and you're not pedaling them, also are not already currently on sidewalks, not allowed. What they have asked for, and I want to make sure our listeners understand, and what the council did last night is they're starting with an enforcement at the village green and other parks.
Correct. Right,
where it's clearly village property, but they have decided they're not going beyond that kind of enforcement zone. I think that the idea is that a message is going to be sent for a month or so. It's going to cost about $10,000 in extra police costs, and they're going to try and do this while maybe the state legislature maybe can make a change in the law. But why not use these other tools that are available?
So, what you do then is you put 12 and 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds in the bike lanes on Crandon Boulevard. and now or on the street, because actually they can't even use the bike lane. So now you've got them on Crandon Boulevard on these devices, competing with 4,000-pound cars. And that's an even bigger danger than allowing them to be on the sidewalks at this time. It's not a great situation for anybody. I understand why they're taking this approach in trying to educate people and take a less draconian step. My position would be let's put a moratorium on the use of these things until we get some capability from the state.
Right, and that would be until that happens. What kind of when you were, and I'm sure you're very well connected, what kind of comments are you hearing from people from the other side, right? From people who want to use them, adults who want to use them.
Well, and that's the other thing, adults will take them in the streets, right? An adult can get on Crandon Boulevard. I don't have a problem with an adult using it and using it responsibly. That's absolutely fine. But it's the kids. And again, they're not being bad kids, but they don't have the same awareness. They haven't been trained in traffic laws. They're not ready to handle that. And I know that, look, there's a lot of good kids, and I agree with these parents. They come in, they say, my kid's a good kid. She's responsible. She does everything she's supposed to do. She wears a helmet. But it's just, I would prefer that we are safer rather than sorry. And I think I've mentioned this before. I was walking my dog down the sidewalk a few weeks ago, and a girl was riding her e-bike toward me, and she wasn't even going that fast. And she was wearing a helmet, but she was looking at her iPhone that was in the iPhone holder that her parents, I would assume, gave her for her e-bike. And I thought that is such a foolish thing to do for your child, to give them an iPhone holder for the e-bike. We have to be better. Look, there's no perfect solution for this right now, but I think we've got to be a little tougher now so that we make sure that we can we relax later.
Well, here's the thing. We don't know what the legislature is going to do.
That's true.
The bill that was introduced by our state representative, Vicky Lopez, is in front of 4 different committees.
Right.
As of today, they did not have a Senate co-sponsor. So its future is uncertain. There's quite some time before the session adjourns. Right. And, not everything gets passed as a standalone bill. Sometimes it's asserted as amendment to another bill. Right. So we'll see what happens in that process. But there's a potentiality here that you might wind up a session without any changes, and the only reaction that will be left, or the action that could be taken, would be at the village level.
That's correct, and I think then we're gonna have to relook at it. And again, we are talking about toys. Again, an adult riding this in traffic, if they want to get to work that way, or they want to get around, or anybody over the age of 16 with a license who's doing this. I mean, it's sort of like with golf carts, right? We do regulate golf carts. And we can't regulate these things right now, which is a little frustrating. Again, that goes to my frustration with the state preempting us on anything they so choose. But it's about safety. That's what this comes down to. It's not if kids want to ride these things, great. I want them to be safe. And what we've got right now is just an unsafe situation for everybody concerned.
All right. Well, we will be continuing to follow that story in the Key Biscayne Independent, as well as a number of other issues that we didn't have time to get to on this show. But another big one involving the environment, pollution in Biscayne Bay, and a solid waste contract, which we talked before, did in fact get approved with a 6% increase and a 4% cap in 2 successive years. So we'll see. It passed by 1 vote.
It was a 4-3, right?
Yeah. So we'll see how that if it has any effect going forward or not. But thank you for joining us and filling in for Tom Moslin.
Have a good time. I hope Tom stays on vacation.
You did have one really good question, though, I thought, about how do we know we didn't ask Chat GPT. So,
yeah. Every once in a while I come up.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, he actually has this thing he wants to do. Maybe he'll come out next show. Well, he wants to have a contest to see who can fool us, kind of like to tell the truth. And we'll see which one is an essay, which one's Chat GPT, and which a real person.
I like it a lot.
All right, let's work on that together, and we'll do it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this edition of Antisocial. I'm Tony Winton.
I'm Mike Davey.
Be safe, everybody.
This way. And we go down the trails to the north point of the Bearcut Bridge. As the sun flies itching your head as you return